Did you know that 1 in 200 men alive today are direct descendants of Genghis Khan? That's 16 million people carrying his DNA. But the shocking truth behind this genetic legacy isn't just about conquest. It's about systematic violence that historians have quietly sanitized for centuries. What they don't teach you in school about the Mongol Empire would make your blood run cold. Before he was the unstoppable force known as Genghis Khan, he was simply Temujin, a boy born with a blood clot clutched in his tiny fist, an omen that he was destined to become a legendary warrior. But destiny isn't always kind, and Temujin's early years were far from those of a future emperor. When his father was poisoned by a rival tribe when Temujin was just 9 years old, his own clan abandoned him and his family, seeing no value in supporting a widow and her children on the harsh Mongolian steppe. The young boy, who would one day rule the largest contiguous land empire in history, was left with nothing. His family survived by foraging for wild plants and hunting small animals like rats and marmots, barely staying alive in a landscape that shows no mercy to the weak. This brutal childhood forged Temujin's iron will and taught him lessons he would never forget. While most children his age were learning hunting skills, Temujin was learning something far more valuable: how to survive when everything is against you. His first kill wasn't an animal, but his own half-brother Bekter, whom he murdered over a dispute about hunting spoils. Not long after, he hunted down and executed a childhood friend who had betrayed him. These weren't just acts of violence, they were early demonstrations of a philosophy that would define his rule: loyalty above all else, and betrayal punishable only by death. As Temujin grew into adulthood, the trauma of his childhood transformed into a revolutionary leadership approach. In a society where bloodlines determined everything, he created something radical: a meritocracy. It didn't matter what clan you came from. What mattered was your loyalty and capability. The tribal system that had once rejected him would eventually bow before his new paradigm. His unification of the Mongolian tribes wasn't achieved through diplomacy or compromise. Temujin offered a stark choice to rival chieftains: submit entirely or face complete annihilation. There was no middle ground, no room for negotiation. Many chose submission after witnessing what happened to those who resisted. Entire tribes wiped out, their leaders executed in humiliating ways, often by pouring molten silver into their eyes or ears. What truly set Temujin apart was his military innovation. He completely restructured the Mongol army into what historians call the decimal system: units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 warriors, regardless of their tribal origins. This destroyed traditional tribal loyalties and created a unified fighting force loyal only to him. He appointed commanders based on skill rather than birth, creating the most effective military machine the world had yet seen. Before battles, Temujin employed psychological tactics that would break his enemy's will to fight. He sent messengers promising mercy and favorable treatment to those who surrendered immediately, and describing in horrific detail the fate awaiting those who resisted. Cities that capitulated were often spared. Those that fought faced total extermination. Perhaps his most overlooked innovation was the establishment of the YAM system, a network of postal stations across his growing empire that allowed information to travel with unprecedented speed. Riders could cover 200 to 300 kilometers per day, giving Temujin intelligence about distant lands and allowing his commands to reach far-flung armies with remarkable efficiency. While intelligence traveled swiftly through Temujin's empire, death followed closely behind. The Mongol army rarely matched its enemies in numbers, yet consistently overwhelmed empires with far superior technology and resources. How? Their battlefield strategies were so revolutionary that military academies still study them nearly a millennium later. Unlike the heavily armored knights of Europe or the massive infantry formations of China, Mongol forces traveled light. Each warrior maintained 3 to 5 horses, allowing them to cover up to 100 miles daily without exhausting their mounts. This mobility meant they could appear where least expected, with each soldier carrying everything needed for weeks of campaigning: dried meat, milk curds, and minimal equipment. Their primary weapon? The composite bow, capable of piercing armor at 200 yards, twice the range of European longbows. What truly distinguished Mongol armies was their tactile discipline. While Europe's knights charged in glory-seeking fashion, and Chinese armies relied on overwhelming numbers, Mongol units executed complex maneuvers with machine-like precision. Their signature tactic, the feigned retreat, exploited their enemy's psychological weaknesses. Mongol units would deliberately break formation, appearing to flee in panic. When pursuing forces broke ranks to chase them, hidden flanking units would emerge from concealment, encircling and annihilating the disorganized enemy. Remarkably, this tactic worked repeatedly despite being widely known. The Hungarian army fell for it at the Battle of Mohi in 1241, as did the Polish knights at Legnica the same year. Even when enemies anticipated the false retreat, the discipline required to prevent individual units from giving chase proved nearly impossible for medieval armies to maintain. When confronting walled cities, the Mongols displayed equal innovation. Lacking siege experience initially, they captured Chinese engineers and quickly became masters of the craft. They constructed trebuchets that could hurl 200-pound stones, developed early flamethrowers using naphtha, and redirected rivers to flood cities or cut off water supplies. When standard approaches failed, they improvised. During the siege of Bayman, Temujin's forces built an artificial hill to elevate their archers after his favorite grandson was killed. The psychological dimension of Mongol warfare proved equally devastating. Before attacking major settlements, they would systematically destroy surrounding villages, deliberately allowing survivors to flee and spread terror. Outside city walls, they arranged several heads in neat pyramids, visible demonstrations of what awaited those who resisted. During sieges, they would drive captured civilians ahead of their forces as human shields, forcing defenders to kill their own people or withhold fire. Body count wasn't just for intimidation, it was administrative. Mongol commanders required precise casualty reports, so soldiers were ordered to cut off one ear from each enemy corpse after battles. These gruesome trophies were counted, recorded, and reported up the chain of command, allowing Temujin to track the progress of campaigns across multiple fronts with remarkable accuracy. Perhaps most disturbing was their pioneering of biological warfare. During the siege of Kaffa in 1346, Mongol forces catapulted plague-infested corpses over the city walls. The defenders fled to Italy, potentially bringing the Black Death to Europe in a pandemic that would eventually kill a third of the continent's population. Those catapulted corpses were just the beginning of a death toll so massive it altered Earth's climate. The Mongol conquests under Genghis Khan and his successors represent what might be history's largest genocide, with modern scholars estimating between 40 and 60 million people perished. That's approximately 10% of the world's population at the time, a proportional impact that dwarfs even the combined death tolls of both world wars. To grasp this scale of destruction, consider the Khwarezmian Empire of Central Asia. After its Shah executed Mongol ambassadors, Genghis Khan's retribution was absolute. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara and Urgench, among the greatest centers of Islamic learning and culture, were methodically erased. The Khwarezmian civilization, which had flourished for centuries, effectively ceased to exist. The same fate befell the Tangut Shia kingdom, a sophisticated Buddhist state in northwest China that was so thoroughly destroyed that historians still struggle to piece together its culture and language from fragmentary remains. Perhaps most disturbing was the 1258 sack of Baghdad, not by Genghis himself, but by his grandson, Hulagu Khan. The Mongols breached the walls of the intellectual capital of the Islamic world, home to the House of Wisdom and its vast library. Contemporary accounts claim the Tigris River ran black with ink from countless manuscripts thrown into the water. A city of nearly 1 million people was reduced to fewer than 10,000 survivors. Scholars still debate how much ancient knowledge was forever lost in this single catastrophe. The environmental aftermath of Mongol conquests was equally profound. Vast regions once cultivated by thriving agricultural societies became depopulated so severely that forests reclaimed former farmlands. This massive reforestation actually removed enough carbon from the atmosphere to cool the planet, what scientists now call the Genghis Khan cooling event. It's perhaps the only known instance of human violence creating a measurable impact on global climate. Beyond the immediate death toll lies another disturbing legacy. Genetic evidence suggests widespread sexual violence across the conquered territories. A 2003 genetic study found that approximately 8% of men within the former Mongol Empire's boundaries, roughly 16 million men today, carry a Y chromosome lineage linked to the Mongol royal family. This suggests a pattern of systematic rape that historian Jack Weatherford described as selective breeding on an unprecedented scale. The economic and technological consequences extended for generations. The destruction of irrigation systems in parts of Central Asia and Persia turned once fertile regions into deserts. Trade routes that had connected east and west since Roman times were disrupted or abandoned entirely. In regions like Khorasan, modern Iran, Afghanistan, population levels wouldn't recover to pre-Mongol numbers until the 20th century, a demographic collapse lasting nearly 800 years. Yet, despite this unprecedented carnage, modern popular culture often portrays Genghis Khan as a visionary leader ahead of his time, focusing on his religious tolerance, meritocratic system, and creation of the Pax Mongolica trade era. This sanitization reveals our uncomfortable relationship with history's most successful conqueror. His administrative innovations came at the cost of human suffering on a scale that's difficult to comprehend. And so, we're left with a disturbing paradox. The man who drenched the medieval world in blood also created an empire where merchants could travel safely across continents, where religious freedom was protected by law, and where the first diplomatic immunity was established. His administration revolutionized communication with a yam system, standardized currency across Asia, and promoted literacy even among common soldiers. But we must resist the modern tendency to sanitize Genghis Khan. Behind each innovation lay mountains of corpses. His postal system ran through depopulated lands. His religious tolerance came after slaughtering millions of believers. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, was built atop genocide. History isn't comfortable. It's messy, contradictory, and often horrifying. If you want more unvarnished looks at humanity's darkest chapters, subscribe to our channel. The past shapes our world in ways we rarely acknowledge, and only by confronting its brutal truths can we truly understand ourselves.